So welcome. I'm glad you're here. My name is Christy Mahan. I own Dream
Christy.
Vacations, Escape Artist Holidays. And tonight we'll be talking about Ireland. Ireland's one of my favorite destinations to visit. I've been there more than a dozen times myself. It's a wonderful, wonderful place. And we're going to be covering this tonight during our presentation. For those of you who are new to this, this is part of our ongoing destination series. Every week we visit a new place in our We Will Travel Again events. It's a way for us to look forward to when travel is no longer paused and we feel free to move about, do our thing again. You can always see a list of what is coming up soon, or click on the link to recordings of previously recorded events at bit.ly/We Will Travel Again events. Next week, we're going to be doing the United States with Viking. They will be having new ships on the Mississippi River and the Great Lakes. So both of those are coming up next week. So let's jump right in to Ireland. Now let's get a little oriented, shall we? So Ireland is an island made up of two different distinct countries. Of course, there's the Republic of Ireland, which is the vast majority of it. And then this eastern quadrant, which is Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK. There are many ways to enjoy Ireland as a vacation. The whole island is about the size of the state of Maine. So it is reasonably sized to see it in little parts, broad strokes, or just hitting all the highlights in a relatively short period of time. There are lots of different ways you can visit Ireland. Think of it at the level of service on your vacation. You can have a fully escorted tour. You can have an independent vacation, meaning you're totally solo, or something that's kind of in the middle called a hosted vacation, where you might get some tours in particular places and have a point of contact with you in country, but otherwise your days are entirely yours to do whatever you want with. Like I said, you can be in Ireland for a short amount of time to a long amount of time, any way from a short week to multiple weeks. There's plenty of see and do. Despite its small size, Ireland is richly packed with lots to see, and we're going to hit the highlights today. There's lots of ways to go about things. Like I said, you can do a regional approach. You could say, oh, well, I'm just going to stay down here in the Southwest. There's lots to stay here. And then maybe spend 4 or 5 nights here. And then maybe spend 4 or 5 nights near Dublin. So you can do it in 2 chunks. You could be on a tour that hits the big sites all the way around the country. Or you could do the works and really get involved in doing a lot of different touring all over the country. There's lots of different ways to also enjoy your accommodations in Ireland. Ireland really put B&Bs on the map. Bed and breakfasts are their bread and butter. There's more B's for you. But of course there are hotels, and there are also luxury castles that you can stay in. These are true castles. They're not modern castles. They're true castles that have become hotels. Some of them are quite famous, like Ashford Castle, but others are all over the country. There's quite a few of them. Some of them are really impressive. You can make your trip into Ireland a mix of all of those accommodation types, or just stick with one. There are different ways to go about touring in Ireland. Luxury motor coaches are the way most fully escorted tours are arranged. You could do a self-drive vacation, and I have probably a 50-50 mix of clients who do Ireland solo, independent, and drive themselves versus the ones that take part in a fully escorted tour. There is something that's kind of in between, and that's chauffeur-driven or small private group tours. So if you are thinking about really customizing a trip for maybe you and your family, maybe yourself, your parents, your children, like a 3-generation trip, or, maybe 20 or fewer people, but you want to really specify the itinerary, we can arrange for a private guide, a private driver, and your own private van. It's a pretty nice way to go. You can also see Ireland in coastal cruises. Celebrity, Azamara, a few cruise lines do the coasts of Ireland that will really give you a nice taste of it as well. So what it always boils down to is when you work with a travel agent, you need to have an idea of what your vacation style is. The kinds of things you want to see, of course, and things you don't want to see, the kinds of things you want to experience and don't want to experience, but also Who are you as a traveler? Do you like to be spontaneous? Do you like to plan? Are there definitely must-see items on your list? And it's also about what's your why. Why do you want to go to Ireland? Why would you want to go anywhere in particular that's got your attention? And that is definitely part of the conversation to have with your travel agent. So we're going to talk about some of those whys tonight. One of the number one reasons people travel to Ireland is because they have family history, right? Their family heritage is from Ireland. And generations of Irish immigrants came to the United States, leaving their home and their families behind. But there seems to be that instinctual tie back to the home country. Even if the people that had been left behind were no longer in contact with your family today. I know quite a few of my clients have done their family history research, and maybe they have the name of a town or even like a parish church name. They don't have much to go on, but they want to integrate it into a trip to Ireland. It's not the whole trip, but it's something that makes it personal. This is the city of Cobh. It's along the southern coast, and it's the jumping off point for so many immigrant ships that left to come to the New World. And there's a great museum here about it. There's a wonderful statue, of course, and it's also the city that the Titanic last made port on before her fateful voyage. But aside from family history, there's a lot of pop culture that gives people an excuse to come to Ireland. One of my earliest loves for Ireland was the classic movie, The Quiet Man, with Maureen O'Hara and John Wayne. It's on every year on TV as part of, your St. Patrick's Day celebrations. And it really paints such a beautiful picture of the countryside, gives you a flavor of people and village life, even back then. But it's certainly a great inspiration to come. Now, of course, there have been tons of movies about Ireland more recently. If you've ever seen Waking the Divine, that's another fun one. There's tons of them. Some of them are romance movies. Some of them are about music. Mighty Mighty Bosstones. There's lots and lots of them. There are always great excuses to kind of light a fire and say, hey, you know what? Let's go to Ireland. That place looks cool. It is. There's also more modern references to Ireland. It's been the filming location for lots of places, even stories not about Ireland. You might recognize this, The Dark Hedges. This was featured in the Great Game of Thrones. Great deal of the Game of Thrones was filmed in Northern Ireland. So you can visit filming locations. You can even check out some places that are designed specifically for those Game of Thrones fans that really want to get their game on. Lots of excuses to get to Ireland, not the least of which are the really welcoming people of Ireland. The Irish are natural storytellers. They're great conversationalists, and they're so truly happy to kind of tuck you into a conversation, bring you into a fold, whether you're enjoying lunch or you're grabbing a pint after dinner. They're so happy to just welcome you. They love to chit chat with tourists. And I got to tell you, invariably, whenever I've gone to Ireland, you'll meet some random person over lunch or a tourist location, right? Like the gal who's checking tickets at some tourist site, and you'll just get to chatting because you say, "Oh, I'm from wherever you are in the States. I'm from New Jersey or whatever." "Oh, I know somebody in New Jersey." And before you know it, you're talking about places that you've been, that they've been. It's comical, but they really are wonderful people, and they're so happy to share their country and their culture with us. Vacationing there. Like I said, there are hundreds of reasons to visit Ireland, whether you're interested in outdoor pursuits, the history, we're going to talk about that, pub crawls, great music, and just on and on and on and on. So let's dive right into what might be some great reasons to go to Ireland, and certainly some great things to see and do while you're there. So of course, Ireland is known most as the Emerald Isle. It's green, it's lush, it's green, green, green. It's true. This is no joke. This is not hyperbole. Ireland is uniquely positioned, not just that it's an island, but it's on the other end of the Gulf Stream that flows up from the Gulf of Mexico through Florida, and it ends up here. And it makes their climate very temperate. It doesn't have harsh winters, it doesn't have harsh summers, and it has like a passing shower every day, which is also why you have the association of rainbows with Ireland. You'll see a rainbow pretty frequently while you're there. This climate lends itself to not just lush landscapes, all the greens, but also to beautiful gardens. As you tour Ireland, you'll visit different castles. Some of them are left in ruins for you to explore that way. Others are manor houses, perhaps completely restored, or maybe they never fell out of repair, but they also have beautiful grounds. And so there are quite a few really elegant gardens that you will come across that have what seem like out of place items, tropical flowers, hibiscuses and gladiolas, even palm trees. And it's because the climate is so mild. It's those extremes are lacking, and it has the moisture that it can be this verdant ground for so many wonderful things. And of course, there's stunning things to see. Just the landscape is beautiful. Most people, when they arrive in Ireland or depart from Ireland, they come and go through the three major airports. There's Shannon, which is in the west, Dublin, which is in the east, and in Northern Ireland, Belfast. If you arrive in Shannon, typically you'll arrive very early in the morning. Flights typically arrive before 8 a.m., sometimes like 6 a.m. But one of the first really magnificent things you can see from there is taking a quick drive to this. This is the Cliffs of Moher. And if you get there as the sun is burning off the morning mist, it's really spectacular. These are 600-foot cliffs, sheer cliffs down to the Atlantic Ocean, and they're the tallest sea cliffs in Europe. It's a really spectacular way to start your trip or end your trip, depending if you're coming or going to and from Shannon. And it is on most major sightseeing tours. There's also this. This is a very unique natural wonder. This is all the way up in Northern Ireland on the northern coast. It's called Giant's Causeway. And it has that name and a really interesting legend that goes along with it. And that's part of the charm of so much of Ireland's history. There's all these great legends, all these great stories. But what's geologically interesting about this is thousands of these basalt columns. They're all hexagons. And there's thousands of them. And, a natural event, quickly solidifying lava, right, in the sea is what caused these formations to happen. But now you can climb all over them. It's a really neat place. There's also a really great interpretive visitor center there. So not only is there information about the physical history of the place, it's also about the legends that surround this, how people would explain this before they understood the geology of it. There's so many different ecosystems. There's so many different places in Ireland that are very unique from one another. This picture on the right is of the Burren. It's a limestone plateau on the west coast of Ireland. You have to kind of go through it to get to the Cliffs of Moher. And most of the topsoil has been completely eroded away and the limestone is exposed. And in this very unusual environment, very rare plants exist. A lot of plants that are here are nowhere else in the world. It's just a very precious environment. There are other things to see and do here other than, some flowers and such. There's this Neolithic site. It's called Polnabron Dolmen. There are many dolmens all over Ireland. It's from a culture that is so far in the distant past that there's a lot of speculation about what they might have been for. This particular dolmen is it looks like a little house when you see it from the front. This is the side view. So it looks like it has a roof and some verticals. I can stand in the front of it. It's as tall as I am, about 5.5 feet tall on the far end. And then it slopes a little bit. It's obviously not a house. There's contemplation about whether it was part of it's the internal structure of something that was once over top of it, an earthen structure that's simply no longer there. There's lots of this mysterious, enigmatic stuff all over Ireland because Ireland has been occupied for 5,000 years. 5,000 years of human history in Ireland. That's older than the pyramids in Egypt. And this site is like the granddaddy of them all. This is Newgrange. Newgrange is part a complex of all these archaeological sites about an hour and a half north of Dublin in the Brunnaboyne region. It's a beautiful river valley area. It has a huge, varied but long history in the people who have lived on this island. And this monument, if you will, this domed monument in the back here is another one of these very ancient things that there's been, a lot of study done to try to figure out what it's about, why it is, what it is, da, da, da. But what's spectacular about this Newgrange is that, like Stonehenge over in England, this has an alignment, an astrological alignment, in its case, with the rising sun on the shortest day of the year, the winter solstice. And I'll tell you a little bit about it. When you go here, again, great visitor center, tells you all the stuff you need to know about the peoples of this area, the history of it, and the history of the excavations, which is also interesting. It's also a great gift shop. But when you go here, you have to take a tour. And when you get to this specific spot, you get a chance to go into this monument. And you have to go over these curbstones. There's a staircase that leads, you can see that guardrail, the little handrail. But you go over the curbstones that surround the whole mound. And this one in the front is the most decoratively carved. These carvings are among the oldest in Europe. And then you go in through this doorway. And what's above the doorway is what they call a light box. This is the opening through which that morning sunrise light comes in. When you go inside, you and say 20 other people file through this narrow little corridor and get you from the outside into this big open chamber on the inside, easily big enough for 20 plus people to stand in. So you don't feel crowded or anything. And it has a huge domed roof that is still intact from all those years ago, and water doesn't get in. It's a dry fit, mortar-free environment. It's a pretty magnificent achievement in engineering, considering how old it is. So once everybody's inside, your tour guide will tell you about it. And then what they'll do is they'll say, now we're going to turn off the lights, because of course it's lit for us. We're going to turn off the lights for about 20 seconds and let you see our replication, right? They're going to replicate what it looks like as that as the solstice sunrise happens in winter. So they turn off all the lights and then they simulate that light. And you can see the sunrise as if it was on, that midwinter morning, creeping up the same corridor you just walked in. It's just like the light spills across the floor and it eventually comes into this big room that you're standing in. The room itself is like a big round space, but it has 3 little niches off of it. And in each niche is this big stone basin. The expectation was that there were like cremated remains put in those spaces. So the light fills this room, this chamber with its beautiful glowing light, as if to perhaps call the souls to their next destination. It's very interesting, but it's a beautiful experience. And there are these really cool glyphs on the inside, and that's where the sunlight strikes exactly at the right. That's like at its zenith. So lots of really neat stuff that are both astrological and kind of mystical going on at Newgrange. Now there's other types of ancient things in Ireland, not just the very, very ancient Neolithic stuff, like the dolmens and the cairns that are Newgrange. There are also these ring forts. There are several of them all over Ireland. You can imagine very easily that a village would have lived around it. But in times of trouble, whether with maybe other tribes coming to invade, or this is open water to the north, they would all run inside this huge fort to be protected, and they could defend it from the walls. It's very big. The walls itself are 12 to 15 feet thick, and there are different, ramparts to stand on to defend it from. There are niches inside the walls. This type of existence can be seen in a lot of different places. They have all over the island. There are about 3 or 4 of them. They call them folk parks, but what they really are, they're like living history museums, where they will teach the guests what it was like to live at certain time periods. Not all of the folk parks have the same time period they're focused on. Some focus on the Middle Ages, some focus on ancient history. So they're a little different from one another, but you get to understand the kind of housing, regular people lived in, not just the castles, right? How they hunted, how they traded, what kind of goods did they keep. So you get that living history piece. It's definitely a fun thing for the whole family. And it's interesting because it does kind of paint a different picture for you, because it shows you the kinds of things that are more temporary, right? Castles tend to have more permanence than the kinds of things you see in these living history museums. So as we move on in Irish history, we're going to talk about the incoming wave of Christianity. Now, everybody's familiar with St. Patrick being the patron saint of Ireland, but he's not the only saint who called this place his home. St. Bridget, St. Kevin, many. Okay, this is a beautiful valley. It's about 2 hours south of Dublin, called Glendalough. And this is where Kevin came, and, as a hermit, he stayed here, he prayed, he did his thing, and a monastery grew up in its place after he was gone. And now it's this beautiful valley. It's an interpretive center, and you can totally picture the peaceful life here, to kind of commune, right, with nature and with God. It still has that peace to it. It's beautiful. Now, there are lots of interesting aspects of Christianity in Ireland. And one of the things that is a treasure in Ireland, right, a national treasure, are the high crosses. The high crosses, of which there are several that are still outside where they were originally. Several others aren't inside museums. They told a story, right? They were intricately carved, not just with patterns, but with pictures that told stories from the Bible. An equivalent would be the Gothic cathedral stained glass windows, where there too, they were telling the stories of the Bible, but in picture form, because most people couldn't read. This is the story with the Irish high crosses. This one is at Monasterboice. This is also north of Dublin. And even though the ones that are outside, you can tell that the weather has smoothed out some of those carvings so that the details are missing. But each one of these sites has like a little tourist hut that gives you all the information. So, you're not supposed to go up and touch them. You can't do rubbings or anything like that, but you can still understand because they have the information there, so you can tell what these are supposed to be, whether it's turning the loaves and fishes, multiplying the loaves and fishes, or Noah's Ark, whatever the story is they're teaching. The information that's at the site will explain it to you. One of the most beautiful views in Ireland must be this one. And this is from atop this small hillside, but it's just in such a perfect spot. It's called the Rock of Cashel, and it has been a holy place for centuries. The church that's atop of it now is in ruins. You can see this is what the inside of it looks like. But because it's such an important spot in the history of Christianity on the island, it's got a really great, there's been a lot of work done to recreate some of the other buildings that are up here. So you get to see part of one of the structures that's been completely restored, its roof. There's a beautiful Romanesque chapel, completely restored with these little faces carved on the walls. And you can even see the remains of some paint that's 500 years old. So it's just a stunning view from up here, and it's a great slice of history over a long period of time in this part of central southern Ireland. Now we're going to get to some castles. Now there are some very famous castles in Ireland, and there are some dilapidated castles, and there are some completely restored castles. There are some castles that are even still being lived in Ireland. You get the whole gamut. And if you're driving yourself around in Ireland, you could very easily be just harmlessly driving from point A to point B and see on the side of the road in a farmer's field a derelict ruin of a castle. And before you know it, you're pulling over to take a picture of it, to check it out. They're really ubiquitous. They're everywhere, whether it's ruined castles or abbeys or some of those Neolithic sites. They're all over the place. This really is a target-rich environment. But we're going to talk about some of the more famous Irish castles because they really are very impressive. This one is Blarney Castle. Blarney Castle is not far from Shannon. It's kind of equidistant between Shannon Airport and the city of Limerick on the west coast. It's a little inland. It's on a river. And this is a highway that runs right in front of it. This bridge is a highway. You can tell this is a fortified fortress. Like this is a castle that, isn't just for show. This is a stronghold. If you see enough castles, you'll notice the differences between them, right? But Blarney Castle has a lot to see and do here. There's a folk park adjacent to it. You can't see it in the picture, but behind it, there's a folk park. And it is designed to be like the village that would have existed adjacent to this in that time period. So you'll see, thatched roofed cottages, people who are raising crops that are actually used here. You'll be able to go to a baker. You could see how they're spinning wool, doing all sorts of stuff like that. The castle itself is something you can tour by day. The inside of it is furnished. It's really impressive. But at night, there's a castle banquet here. Now, this is not cheesy medieval times kind of stuff. This is really very impressive. Now, you enter the castle. Your hosts provide you with a pint, or in my case, I took a glass of mead, which is wine made from honey. And you're entertained both before and during your meal. There's a harpist, a violinist, and a choir. It's beautiful. You go from like the entrance hall into the banquet hall, and you're seated at long banquet tables. And they usually pick someone out of the audience, right, who's going to be lord and lady for the night. And it's usually some couple that's celebrating a big anniversary, that kind of thing. And you eat traditional foods, no utensils, using your fingers. I had a really yummy dinner. I mean, one of us had roast chicken. I had ribs, yummy soup with fresh baked bread. You can eat the soup with your bread. And like root vegetables, like carrots and beets, turnips, that kind of stuff. Really kind of an unusual and unique experience to try. There are a couple other castles that do this, and each of them has their own kind of theme to it. There's another castle near this one called Napogue. Totally different looking castle, different kind of setup on the inside, but same idea, right? It's a banquet. And then what you see next to it, this low building, is called Dirty Nelly's, and that is a really fun pub. Blarney is a great place to make a base of operations for a couple of days. There are some really nice hotels across the street. So you have this beautiful river and the park and the grounds and the castle right around the corner. That's Blarney. But of course, everybody's heard of Blarney Castle. Blarney Castle is more in ruins than you might think, considering everybody says they have to go to Blarney Castle. It's more of a tower. And of course, the reason you and everybody else is coming here is to kiss the Blarney Stone. So just to kind of paint a better picture for you, in this tower building, right, it's pretty big. There's like two really perfectly functional stone spiral staircases. One goes up and the other side goes down. So the traffic's kind of in one direction. So, you don't have to fret about going up and down castle steps. But everybody you can see in this picture on the upper side here are in line to kiss the Blarney Stone. And this person is actually doing it. So if you look in the upper left here, you'll see that there's the wall of the actual castle itself, and then this crenellation that sticks out a little way. And in between the wall and the crenellation are hollows. And these would have been defensive, right? People defending the castle could drop rocks on somebody who was attacking the castle. So funny thing about the Blarney stone is that the stone is in the outer crenellation. It's at the bottom of the crenellation wall. So you sit on the wall of the castle, and then there's a nice gentleman who's here, and he'll help you not be scared. And you grab the railings behind you, and you kind of walk your way down the rails so you can reach the Blarney Stone. You kind of kiss it from over your head. Now, of course, to do so, it gives you the gift of eloquence, which is something the Irish have, of course. And while you're up here waiting, of course, you can also see the hollow of the castle. It's 4 or 5 stories tall. The first couple of stories actually are full rooms. They have stone ceilings. You can see their fireplaces and such like that. But then the uppermost floors are missing because they were timber floors. So you can see down into the ruin of what is left of the castle. It has beautiful park grounds around it. It's a really pretty spot. And there's some nice shopping in the area as well. So whether you come in from the Dublin area or the Shannon area or even the Belfast area, there really is a castle everywhere you look. This is probably one of the castles closest to the Belfast airport. It's Carrickfergus. It's another one that's like a fortress, right? Like this has actually cannon on it. It faces out the open sea on the east coast of Ireland, and it's restored on the inside. So you really get a sense of what the interior of this castle would have been like, you know, notwithstanding the jumbo chess set on the floor, but you have a sense of, you know, walking around inside the castle, the spiral staircases and how they were defensive. You get to learn all those sorts of cool stuff when you mill around castles, especially the ones that are complete. Whether you take a tour or not, grab a guidebook. They're easy to tour on your own. Now, some castles are much more modest. This is a tower house. It's not as old as some of the others, and it's certainly not as massive. It's just a tower house. And over the years, other people have occupied it naturally, right? And in this case, a beautiful Irish cottage was tucked up to it. So this is all one home now, but it's actually a museum. And it's Thorballie, and it's a museum to the writer William Butler Yeats, because for a time he lived here and worked here. It wasn't like the home he grew up in, that kind of thing, but they do venerate their cultural history, whether it's ancient or not so ancient. So there's lots of really quaint places like this to visit as well. If you've seen The Quiet Man, you'll recognize this if you approach it from the other side, not this side of the street, but if you come from the other side of the street. It was featured in one key moment in the movie when they run away to have their first date together and they go traipsing through a stream. That's the stream that's next to this building. Just to give you a sense of what some of the other castles look like when they're not repaired is this one. And this is a very famous castle. It's Laois Castle. It's up again on the Antrim coast, way up north by Giant's Causeway. And it is very romantic in the fact that it's like precariously perched on this outcropping. So much of it is tumbled into the sea over the centuries. It's still quite safe to go into, of course. Here too, there's a visitor center and it tells you about the history of the place. But it truly is in ruins. There's no roofs here. And what would have been a drawbridge, right? Like a defensive drawbridge. There's a fixed bridge here now to get you from the mainland to the outcropping. But again, it's perched in this really fantastic spot. Talk about picking good places to put your pile of bricks. It's a very stunning spot. And more like a lot of the castles you'll see just going from place to place, whether you're on an escorted tour or on your own, you're going to pass a lot of little ruins all along the way. I always recommend, whether you're traveling as part of a tour or on your own, to get a very specific map. It's the Michelin map. Not just any old map of Ireland, the Michelin map of Ireland. And every time I go, I get a new version of the map. Because the Michelin map not only has, of course, the roads on it, which you could use your apps for in your phone, but it marks so many of the sites along the way. So it does help orient you on some of the things you might see, whether you're intending to visit them or not. So among the many things in Irish history are more modern Irish history. And if you're familiar at all between the strife and struggle that happened between the loyalists, those are the supporters of the crown and Protestantism, and the people who believed in a free Irish republic, and mainly Catholics, there were the Troubles, and they waged for generations, and they really only came to a peace accord in the 1990s. When I first started going to Ireland more than 25 years ago, if you wanted to go to Northern Ireland, you had to go through checkpoints, like Checkpoint Charlie kind of checkpoints, right? Barbed wire, armed guards, the works. It was a really unpleasant thing to even contemplate as a visitor, much less as people who lived in some of the border cities. And one of the biggest cities in Northern Ireland is Londonderry. And people either call it Derry or Londonderry. It's the same place. It depends where your loyalties lie, so to speak. And Derry saw its fair share of those troubles. I have very good friends that grew up in and around Derry. And I have been lucky enough to hear the history through their own eyes, which is great. But you can take a walking tour around Derry. Derry is a beautiful city. It was recently named one of the best cities in the world. I forget what award it won. It's a beautiful city, but you can take a walking tour through Derry to learn some of this more modern history. And one of the things that is extra special is in Bogside, there are these wonderful murals, and they're painted on the sides of ordinary buildings. And they capture, in essence, those troubles, what it was like to live in those times, and the different moments that were very specific in those times, whether it was Bloody Sunday or the day the peace accords were signed. So taking a walking tour in Derry is a piece of kind of living history, but it's modern, right? It's not like the thatched cottages and how they tanned hides. This is about modern history. It's a very different type of thing. And no matter where you are in Ireland, no matter who's your tour guide, they're so proud to share this culture with you. And they really want you to understand it. So don't ever hesitate to ask questions. No question too foolish. Just be respectful. Like I said, early on, there's a history with the Titanic in Ireland too. Not just because it was the last place the ship made port before it began its crossing, but because it was built in the dockyards in Belfast. And there is now this magnificent museum dedicated to it up in Belfast. Now, this is on my list because it wasn't there the last time I went, or I couldn't get there the last time I went. But another magnificent thing to do is visit museums, not just open air things like the murals in Derry or the individual castles that have visitor centers, but real museums. There are quite a few of them. A lot of them are in Dublin. Dublin's a great walking around city. And of course, now you can Uber your way around, kind of make it a little easier on yourself. It's a great walking around city. It's a great place to either stay in the city itself for a couple of days or stay outside the city and make little day trips in. You can use mass transit or Ubers, that kind of thing. There are several really, really amazing museums. They're small, so they're easily digestible. You don't feel like you're spending the whole day in a museum. Again, whether you're part of a tour or you're on your own, they really highlight some of the most monumental things, accomplishments of Irish history. And this one you see here, the large item, is the Tara brooch. I've made it as big as I can make it, really, for the sake of the screen. But what you can't see, which you'll never see until you're standing in front of it, is the ridiculously intricate, ornate details that are like microscopic. Like I was standing in front of it and I was just like my head leaning against the glass case, wondering how the heck did anybody do this? The craftsmanship is stunningly remarkable and it's itty bitty. How do you do that? So whether it's something as magnificent as this brooch that would have been a king's brooch, or these more ancient gold collars, or something from, again, the Catholicism piece, right? The Christianity piece, right? These monastresses with this ridiculously intricate, tiny detail metalwork. You can see why Vikings wanted to raid the monasteries in Ireland, because they had treasures like these. Wow. So lots of cool things, whether it's museums of natural history, museums of Irish history, or also art museums. They have a beautiful national gallery. It's not very big. One of the nice things about it, though, is it features a lot of Irish artists, which frankly, I don't think get enough gallery space in other big museums. They also have this one particular Caravaggio painting, and it itself has a really cool story. It was a lost Caravaggio. And the museum in Ireland restored it. It had been covered with so much soot and ash from a fireplace that it was sitting above for like 100 years. Nobody even knew it was a Caravaggio painting. So it took some investigation and a whole lot of very delicate work with a Q-tip to clean this masterpiece, and now it hangs in the National Gallery. Now, if you're going to be in Dublin, you got to see the other national treasure that's here, and that's in Trinity University, and it is the Book of Kells. It's an illuminated manuscript. They actually have several illuminated manuscripts. It's not just one. And when you go in, you get a chance to walk through a little bit of an exhibit until you get to the main event, and you can see this really intricate, again, super intricate scroll work and details. I don't have steady hands. I don't know how anybody can do this stuff. So I'm always amazed at how skilled people have to be to do these kinds of really beautiful things. They do turn the page in the Book of Kells in the case every so often. So if you've been before and you want to see it again, likely you will see a different page, a different set of pages. And they do the same thing for the other books that are there. And of course, you walk out through this magnificent library, which is, postcard picture perfect. In Trinity Library, it's right in the middle of town. One of the best traditions of Ireland is music and singing and dancing, all of those things. And it's given with such joy. You don't have to go out of your way to find a concert in Ireland, whether it's street music, or pub music. You're going to enjoy it. It might feel spontaneous to you. Oh, honey, let's stop and listen to the street performers. Or, they're starting to pick up some musical instruments while we're sitting in a pub one night for dinner. For them, it's just Tuesday night at the pub. Guys come out of the woodwork, they bring their own instruments, and they sit around with a pint, and they just start to play and sing, and it's wonderful. Take the time to enjoy this part of their culture. Again, freely given and happy to share with us. There's so many things to see and do in Ireland. If you love being outdoors, whether you like hiking, because there's plenty of places to take short hikes, big hikes, medium hikes, easy hikes, tons of hiking. There's also great golf in Ireland. And of course, if you want to golf when you're there, you have to plan for it ahead of time. You can't really be spontaneous about that. But there's wonderful places to golf. You can also do horseback riding. That's a nice thing to do in the countryside. You can also go kayaking or small boat fishing, like small watercraft, small watercraft sailing, and fishing. Some of the country hotels or the farmhouses will loan you fishing equipment so that you can hit the stream that runs through their place or their lake. And then if you're really lucky, they'll cook what you catch. Now, remember, Ireland is an island, and it's filled with rivers too. So there's lots to fish for. If you are so inclined, you will probably visit a church or two, just because it's a beautiful place to visit. This is the interior of St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin, and it is rather spectacular Gothic church. The outside is dark and ominous looking, but the inside is overwhelming, soup for your eyes. I was lucky enough to be here. I literally was just planning on going in for like 15 minutes, just poke around, have a look, take a couple of pictures. I ended up staying for almost an hour because we caught the organist rehearsing. So it was an empty church, just a fistful of tourists milling around. And the acoustics of this amazing organ playing was remarkable. It took my feet out from under me. I sat down and I just let myself get lost in it. So whether you want to partake of an actual service, by all means, doors always open, right? But you might just stumble into something that's even extra special, whether you need it or not when you travel. There's lots of crazy things you can do here too. I think I mentioned at the beginning that if you're a Game of Thrones fans, you can put on your gear, grab a shield and a sword, and get your game on. There are a few companies in the north that really cater to the Game of Thrones crowd. And they have all sorts of experiences you can do. You can do archery, you can, dress up and play. It kind of makes grown men little boys, but you know what? That's all good too. There's also more like wholesome things to do, like go for a horse and buggy ride. This is down in Killarney. Killarney is a great place to make a base of operations too. It's in the southwest, and the famous Ring of Kerry is right there. I'm partial to Dingle Peninsula. Don't laugh, that's really the name of it. But they're beautiful places to make a base of operations. There's great castles, there's great things to eat. And Muckro's house has horse and buggy rides. It's things that you just don't do when you're at home, And then if you're a little more adventurous, you can do this. On the opposite end of the country, way up north again by Giant's Causeway, is the Carrickfergus rope bridge. Now I can tell you, I've been to Ireland more than a dozen times, and I never had any interest at all in doing the rope bridge. I've known it's there, not on my list, because I'm not a big fan of heights and things that say like rope bridge in the title. But my daughter, whose shoulder you can see in this picture, totally was like, Mom, I'll be there. I'll take care of you. Don't you worry. I'll hold your hand. So with that kind of pressure, of course I had to go. You park your car over here at the car park. You take a beautiful walk along the meadows above the sea. And then you get to where there's this island that's separate from the mainland. And the story, of course, is that it's a fishing village on the other side of the island. And for generations, they've strung their own rope bridge from the mainland to the island. Every year, they put it up in the spring, they take it down in the fall, whatever the seasons are for their fishing. And now it's a tourist attraction. Now, I have to tell you, while the upper part of the bridge is a nice network of ropes, the bottom is cables. So I felt very safe on it. I wasn't swaying in the wind or any of that, which is the picture I had in my head. But you are always off the ground, but it's a beautiful view. And it is another one of those little adventures you can take while you're on vacation. Now, if you've heard me talk about Scotland a couple of weeks ago, you'll remember I talked about whiskey distilleries, except they're Scotch distilleries. In Ireland, there are many whiskey distilleries that you can visit. I've been to 2 or 3 of them over the years. They're a great place to kind of do something, again, unusual, learn a little bit about culture, a little bit about the kind of family history that goes into each of these distilleries. They're all family-run businesses originally, if not still. And you learn about the kind of deep inherently, the inherent pride they have in making this very special thing. You learn about the angel's portion, those are the vapors that come off during the process. And you learn about why they call it the water of life. It's a really special thing you don't expect to have. And of course, at the end, they give you a little sample, right? You get to have a wee dram of what they make there. Like I said, I've been to a few of them. They're really more interesting than I ever thought they'd be, and they're absolutely worth your visit. Let's talk about pubs for a moment, being that we're on the subject of alcohol. Pubs in Ireland, if you don't know, are the local watering hole, but it's more than that. It's a great place for lunch, for dinner, for the whole family. It's not a rowdy bar like we have bars in the States. I wouldn't bring my 9-year-old or 10-year-old to a bar, But absolutely. This place, the Druid's Chair, we went to one night for dinner on our last trip. And this one was more like a sports bar, part of it. There was a part of it that was more traditional and part of it was more like a sports bar because they played the game, right? So there was always European football, right? And or rugby or hurling, which is a national pastime. So lots of sports and horse racing, like this happened to be a sports bar. But still, there was a whole traditional pub on the one side where we had great food for dinner and just kind of got to chatting with the locals and stuff. You will not be disappointed in a pub in Ireland. I eat pub lunches every time I go, and oftentimes dinners for the same reason. You get to meet some people, you get to hear the local music, see the local scene, and of course, get a pint, whether you're drinking, a beer or whiskey or cider. This is where I fell in love with cider. It was in Ireland. Now let's talk about food. I think the UK and Ireland had historically gotten like a bad rap on food. This is not your grandparents' story of, oh, the food there. Mm-mm-mm. Yummy. Again, it's a very farm to table environment, culture, or boat to table, depending. But it all starts with your Irish breakfast. And whether you're staying in a hotel, a B&B, or a fancy castle, you're going to have the opportunity to have this every morning. You can have other things too, but this is the main event. Okay? This is a traditional Irish breakfast, and whether or not it's homemade bread toast or it's like a scone, like a real scone, or like really yummy brown bread, there's like pork 4 ways, eggs, a grilled tomato, grilled mushrooms. What you see here besides is like a Canadian sliced bacon, breakfast sausages, and 2 different kinds of sausage, more sausages. There's pork. There's lots of pork on the plate. But fret not. If you are a vegetarian, there's plenty where that came from too. My daughter had the most delicious flapjacks she's ever had in her life. That's what they call them. And our B&B hostess, she was like, oh, she doesn't like that stuff? Not to worry. I'll put together something wonderful. She did. She made clotted cream with strawberries and all this other stuff. You will not be disappointed by the service over breakfast ever. But that's not the only meal of the day, of course. Now, I've talked a lot about pub lunches and pub dinners and stuff, and there are plenty of really nice restaurants. Some of the best meals I've ever eaten in my life, I've eaten in Ireland. Great steak, roasted chicken, and tons of seafood, whether it's that fantastic rainbow trout I had, or scallops and mussels, you name it, right? Open sea, rivers, surf, turf, the works. One thing I will always impress upon my clients is to have the soup of the day. Ireland, like I said, it's a very temperate climate. I have always gone in the spring or the fall. Well, not always, but more often than not, I've done spring and fall. So sometimes a little chilly when I come inside. It's just me. I always order the soup. The soup is going to be made from whatever is fresh that day. So whether it's a potato soup or a fish chowder, you will be scraping the dish, hoping there's more at the bottom somewhere. Delicious. You can also get just a sandwich. I think probably the biggest myth to dispel about sandwiches, though, is that they take it very literally. Slice of bread, slice of ham, like as if you sliced ham off a big a ham that you'd like make for Christmas dinner, right? A slice of ham, slice of bread, as opposed to like deli ham that we have here. Different kind of thing, okay? But you're gonna get fresh made bread, that's awesome. And you're gonna get like honey baked ham in 2 thick slices, also delicious. So it'll be a different experience, but you still have simple stuff, or you can have really elaborate stuff. And it's all gonna be so good. So just to kind of wrap up, a typical visit, at least for me, is I think I told you at the beginning, I start either at Shannon or Belfast, and I tend to end in Dublin. Dublin's a great place to start or end a trip. Like I said, it's a very pedestrian friendly city. It's easy to get around. This is the very famous Halfpenny Bridge. And the lower picture is Grafton Street, which is a fully pedestrian area. Lots of shops, restaurants, pubs, street musicians, vendors, all sorts of things. And it is literally right up the street from Trinity University and the Molly Malone statue. So that's Ireland, the whirlwind tour. Lickety split. Anybody really could go to Ireland. I want to impress this upon you. Whether you're a solo traveler or you're part of a family group, couples, friends. We've been to Ireland with friends before. It's a ton of fun. Or a group, like whether it's a family group or friends group, all together. It's really a great destination for me. It's a really great destination for first-time travelers to Europe. They speak English. They're very welcoming of American tourists, and everything's easy to understand, right? You're not going to be like stumbling around with a translation book or anything like that. And they also have the euro. Northern Ireland uses the British pound, but it's an easy thing to work with. Of course, like I said, sometimes the thing to get you here is your family heritage interests, but it can also be all the other things that Ireland has to offer. History buffs, people who love music and art, nature. Again, if you love to be outside and you love all those beautiful vistas, this is a place to come to. It's also a good excuse if you have a special occasion coming up, whether it's a honeymoon. It was part of my honeymoon, or a big anniversary, another milestone happening in your life. Don't let it get away from you without marking it, especially with a trip to Ireland. The only thing I do want to impress upon you is because so much of this stuff is outside, right? The castles, ruined abbeys, all sorts of things, and the Neolithic sites, you do have to be pretty sure on your feet. It's not to say that you can't get around, but have that kind of confidence to go up steps or to walk on uneven ground. Like I said at the beginning, there's lots of different vacations you can take here. There's lots of different styles. So it really pays to work with a travel agent so that you are lined up with the kind of vacation to Ireland that suits you best. That's probably the most important thing to impress upon you. If you just Google it, you'll see so many things you won't even know what you're looking at. Work with an agent, work with me. I'd be happy to help you. No two travelers are alike. No true reasons to make the trip are the same. So let's talk about the kind of trip you want to have and the kind of vacationer you are, so that we can find the right trip to Ireland just for you. So to thank you guys for participating in tonight's presentation, I am once again offering a little booking incentive. If you are interested in booking an Ireland vacation through my three primary suppliers, that's CIE Tours, Collect Tours, or Globus, and you do so by the end of November, I will offer you a $150 discount from my agency. So by all means, let's talk about planning that next trip. Even if you don't know when that trip can be, let's talk about it. Let's get excited about it, right? It would be nice to get excited about going somewhere right now. And my promotion is also combinable with whatever national promotion that those suppliers have. For example, right now, Colette has a promotion through the end of October that they're discounting most of their trips by 10%. So combinable, it's a good way to stack promotions and get the most bang for your buck. As always, you can contact me through phone, through email. You can reach out to me via my website, Escape Artist Holidays, or catch me on social media. If you haven't already, go to escapeartistholidays.com and enter this contest. We're giving away a Bermuda cruise in just a couple of days. So it's a Norwegian cruise, 4 nights. I think you have 2 years to use the trip. So who knows? You got to be in it to win it, right? I want to thank you guys for being here. If you have any questions, pop them in the chat box, and I will be sure to get back to you with answers. Otherwise, thank you so much for being part of this trip to Ireland tonight. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to talking to you about your next dream vacation.